Hi guys, welcome to Cerrasshop Creates. Today we're going to be working with one of the Dimensional Drinks tumbler sleeves in a 20-ounce skinny straight AF tumbler from Mother Tumbler. Now, this tumbler fit pretty nice and snug into the sleeve, which was great. But just for some extra reinforcement, I'm going to go in and put liquid fusion on the bottom and then around the rim of the sleeve as well. You could use epoxy for this as well, but I just figured liquid fusion would be the best bet and it was faster. You only have to let this dry about 30 minutes, and in addition to all the epoxy layers I'm going to be adding to this tumbler sleeve will never come out. So this is the route I chose for that. You can see it only left a little bit of a rim and it fits nice and snug. I'm going to go outside and spray paint this with a cream and tan metallic gold spray paint. It is raining outside, so I'm not going to record that process, but there's a ton of videos from other creators on how to spray paint if you're having trouble. We're going to be using these 3 PDB colors, so I'll be right back. All right, guys, it is spray painted, and I added a thick coat of adhesive apothecary glitter glue to this tumbler as my adhesive. You could also use epoxy to apply your glitter as well, but I really love adhesive apothecary glitter glue. This glitter right here is Charming from PDB, and I'm using really heavy coverage on the bottom, so about 2 inches on the bottom of the cup and then the actual bottom as well. And then as I angle it down, I'm going to do a little bit less coverage so we can start ombreing them together. So here you can see I'm kind of sprinkling it, and I'm not worried about coating it a ton. Then we're going to go in with Charisma. That is this glitter right here. I love these colors together, and if you're really not great at ombres, that's okay because these all follow the same color palette, so it should be fairly easy to ombre. And as you can see, I ombreed it into Charming, and now once again I'm using a little less coverage so that I can ombre that into the next color. The next color we're going to be using is Nude from PDB. I love this glitter so much. It looks great on so many bases, even a stainless steel base. A lot of times when I use it, I don't paint my base at all, and it gets really great coverage. So like I said, these were all pretty fine glitters, really easy to ombre, so you shouldn't have much trouble. Look at that sparkle. I'm going to epoxy this 2 times and then grab my vinyl. All right, guys, that was epoxied 2 times and it is nice and smooth. I'm sorry that I did not record my epoxy process, but like I said, there's a ton of creators that show you how to epoxy as well. This was a 12-inch by 12-inch vinyl I got from Gracefully Created, and I just trimmed them with a pair of scissors so that I can have 3 thick stripes going up my cup. If you wanted this to cut on your Cricut, you could just make a rectangle in your Cricut and cut it, but I kind of just free-handed it, honestly, because it is much easier for me to do that. So I laid one of them on the top of the cup, and then I'm going to put this one on the bottom. That way it's kind of easier to decide where the middle one is going to be. I did not use a roller for any of this, but I work with vinyl a lot, so I've gotten pretty good at just eyeballing it. So here we're going to do that last one, and then I'm going to repeat this whole process on the other side of the cup as well. There's 4 sides, so I'm going to do this on the opposite side. I'm not going to record that because I don't want to make this video longer than it has to be, and you already see me doing it on one side, so you'll just repeat that process on the other. The squeegee is really great for smoothing out any creases or bubbles, and the vinyl is removable, so as you can see I messed up a little bit, so I just pulled it up and reapplied it. This vinyl is removable, so it's really great. Here I'm taking painter's tape, and I'm just lining that up so I can get a straight line to trim off any excess vinyl that I had with an X-Acto knife, and you could even reuse this tape. I love painter's tape. It rips off so easily, so that's all I'm doing right there. Alright guys, now I'm going to put vinyl striping lines. This vinyl is from Tech Wrap. I am speeding this up because, you get the point of this part. And I'm just outlining all of my vinyl where the vinyl meets the glitter because I like to have clean lines to separate that. Alright guys, now we are ready to apply the decals. These honeycombs I already had baked and ready to go, and I'm just using those as a guide. I do show the clay part here in a few steps, but on the opposite 2 sides of the tumbler where we didn't apply vinyl, I chose to use these white elements from PDB Creative Studio. It's a part from Gracefully Created. It's a part of our collab, and I'm going to put all of the details of that below. And I kind of like to overlap the decals on the edges a little bit and just trim off where it overlays over the vinyl. So this orange flower I'm going to put in the bottom corner, and in that empty space is where the honeycombs are going to be. So how you saw, a minute ago, I had those honeycombs there. that is where they are going to be. I actually did end up removing that butterfly because I didn't like it there. So if you are looking at the finished product and you're like, why isn't that butterfly there? I did not love it. So now flip it over to the opposite side. I'm going to put a butterfly on the bottom. Same process. I'm laying it down. They have a white background, so they show up really great against the glitter. And then we're going to trim off that excess. And then the same with the pink flower on the top. This color palette literally gives me life. I love it so much. All right, get those honeycombs out of there. I cannot wait to get to the clay part. You guys are gonna have so much fun with it. Be careful when you're trimming this up that you don't damage your vinyl. I also did get these pink striping lines that I liked, and I'm gonna add those along the rest of the vinyl. Here you're gonna see me kind of peel up that butterfly because I did not love it at all. So I did play around with that for a little bit until I was happy, but you can place your little decals wherever you want. There we go. All right, so these are the pink striping lines in the same size. I just had a little bit extra left over, so I just outlined all of my gold vertical striping with the pink as well because I thought it looked really nice. It really brought out the vinyl. So now we're going to get started with our clay. This is pink sparkly Sculpey clay that I got in a Sculpey package that I'll show you here in a few minutes. And I'm kneading it in my hands to soften it up. And then I'm using this acrylic clay roller in a marble slab that I got off Amazon. And I am just rolling it so it's all the same thickness. I don't have any fancy tools, so I kind of had to do it by hand. This cookie cutter I also got on Amazon. Now the thing about this cookie cutter is it doesn't cut all the way because I believe it was meant for a cookie to just have the indents, but that's okay because I can just use an X-Acto knife and kind of cut each honeycomb out. I'm sure you can do these by hand, or there's probably better cutters as well on Amazon, but this is just what I grabbed and I really liked the size of it and it was perfect. So as long as you have an X-Acto knife, you can do it this way as well. Now I'm going to peel up each honeycomb and just kind of trim off any more that I need to, and smooth out the edges with my finger. You can also use alcohol ink and rubbing alcohol and a paintbrush to smooth out any areas as well. I love them so much. This pink sparkly clay came in a package, so I don't know the exact color of it, but I am going to find it and link it below for you. I love that it was pre-colored and already sparkly, so we didn't have to do a ton of extra work. And you're gonna need 8 of these little honeycombs if you're following my tutorial exactly. I'm only showing you 3 because I didn't want to hold you guys up, but I did do 8. I laid them on a flat baking sheet with parchment paper, and I baked them at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes, but that's really going to depend on your oven. You should get a thermometer so you know that your oven is heating up to the right temperature, and there are directions on the back of the packaging that you guys can follow and use your best judgment. Mine came out very hard after they got out of the oven, so they were pretty much perfect for that. And they're so cute. I love it. Long pause. Here I am just kind of playing with them in my fingers again before I bake them. Okay. All right, guys, now that they were baked, I chose to put these little black honeycombs behind them. I just cut that in my Cricut. They have the honeycomb shape. And I am just placing the vinyl first so that I can kind of decide where they're all going to lay. And some of them I did sand with a little sanding block. And I'm applying them with liquid fusion. Let this dry for about 30 minutes and leave your tumbler flat on your table. If you stand it upright, then they're going to slowly start to shift down, especially if your glue isn't dry. So there we go. I love liquid fusion to apply literally everything. It just makes it so much easier. All right, guys, now that that is dry, we're going to do our drip. I'm using a little extra epoxy. I typically use CC DIY Fast Set, but I was out at the moment, and I'm mixing equal parts of part A and part B. I always like to make more than I need, just in case. So we are going to mix that thoroughly. And then I am going to add a drop of white Armor Art colorant from CC DIY as well. And then a little bit of the pink Flippin' Awesome paints from the Crystalac company, and I'm just using those to color. You do not need a lot of paint. If you add a lot of paint to your drips, they're going to get very gummy very fast. So we're going to mix that thoroughly. I personally am not worried about air bubbles because I know they will pop with my heat gun. There we go. Now we're adding Pink Panther. This glitter was perfect to match the whole aesthetic of the tumbler, and I knew I wanted my drip to be nice and sparkly, so we did add a generous portion of Pink Panther glitter as well. Now we're going to add Nice and Thick. I typically add a ton of this Nice and Thick, but I only had half of a sample jar left over, so I'm mixing that thoroughly, and then I'm going to let this sit for about 30 minutes to thicken. That is going to vary. You know, if you're using fast set epoxy, you're not going to wait 30 minutes to let it thicken, so it really just kind of depends what products you're using for your drip. But we do want it to be really thick. As you can see right there, that is not thick enough. That will drip the whole way down our tumbler, and we don't want that, okay? I have been doing drips for so long that I know exactly how thick it has to be, and I can usually tell if it is ready to drip or not. I did add another tiny drop of this pink paint because I wanted it to just be a little more pink, but not a ton. All right, guys, you're going to be at a weird angle here because I have to hold this tumbler upright while we drip, so I apologize in advance. Here, I'm going to show you that this is too thin to start working with. I'm going to do a little spot, and I can tell that it is dripping down the cup very fast, and that is not going to give us great results. So I actually did end up wiping it off with a baby wipe and waiting another 10 minutes for it to thicken more. If you look closely, you can see that it is just dripping too far, and I know that if I did my whole drip right now, it would be a mistake. And that's really a personal preference. I like my drips to be short and thick, so if you wanted to drip the whole way down your cup, you know, go ahead and go for it, but that's just not what I am looking for. So now it is ready. You can see that it is really thick and chunky, but I know it will smooth out. Give me a second. I know that the angle is really bad here, but I do adjust it here in a few seconds. I apologize for the bad angle there. Here we go. So I am starting by coating that whole top rim of my cup with my very thick drip, okay? I'm not worried about forcing any drips because I know that it is going to drip down on its own, but the very first thing I want to do is make sure my rim is covered and that top part of the tumbler is covered. And this is really, really thick, so, you know, it might get a little messy, but trust the process. I know that it's going to smooth out over the next 20 minutes. So now we can kind of start putting it over the edge and letting it drip freely. As you can see, I'm kind of just putting a little bit on my popsicle stick, wiping it against the edge, and letting it form its own drips. I try not to force the drips too much because I like to let it do its own thing, you know? There we go. This literally turned out so great. I take my time with my drips, so I will spend quite a bit of the time doing the drips and making sure that each drip is perfect, because if it's not, I'll literally wipe it all off and do it again. So I'm just going over and over, and then here in a few seconds, we're actually going to hit it with our heat gun to get it to start moving down a little bit more. But trust the process. All right, ready? Heat gun time. This heat gun is from Counterculture. I'm sorry about the angle, but I wanted to make sure you could view this whole part, so I couldn't do this part in landscape mode too. I'm hitting it aggressively with my heat gun, and that is going to get the drips to smooth out, any chunky spots to smooth out, and that's going to allow it to freely drip down the cup, but not too much. You know, since we had a really thick drip, it's not going to drip super far. And as you can see right there, I wiped that part off with a baby wipe because I didn't like it. So as long as your drip didn't fully cure yet, if you need to kind of just wipe a little part off and redo it, you totally can. But I would definitely recommend a heat gun for this part because it'll just kind of get it all moving even more. And it probably won't drip much further than this because it is almost cured, if that makes sense. It is really thick and it's not going to drip down much further than this. All right, guys, I did finish that drip, and I put a layer of epoxy on the entire cup. And now we need to sand it because there are some rough spots. So I'm taking the sanding block that I got from the Crystal company, and I'm just kind of lightly sanding the edges. I didn't want to bring out my electric sander because I didn't want it to damage the decals or the honeycombs at all. So I'm doing this all by hand, and I'm being pretty aggressive, especially on the bottom rims. We want all of those parts to be smooth. And now we're going to get our Dremel. This is one of the most important parts. You want to make sure your rim is very smooth, and you want to expose a little bit of stainless steel so that it can get a really good seal. So I love this Dremel. I've been using it for years now, and this is going to smooth out my rim, and then you will see how it'll slowly start to expose a little bit of stainless steel. You don't have to expose a ton, just enough so that when you do your last coat of epoxy, it is sealed in, it is smooth, and it is good to go. So I do this for every single tumbler. See right there, you can start to see that stainless steel is being exposed. You can do this with other tools, but this Dremel, I just feel like it is easiest and I don't mess up when I use this. But I know some people use just a sanding block, or some people use the flap wheels for the Dremel as well. But I really like this method because it's really easy to control. Alrighty, that is literally so perfect. Now I'm just feeling it over to make sure that I don't need to sand any more spots, because if I do, then I'll obviously sand them over again. But everything looks really smooth, and this should be done with just one more layer. And surprise, I am showing you an epoxy process. This is not something that I do, but I thought it was important to show you how I epoxy cups. So I'm using a little bit of extra epoxy for this last layer, and I will link them below. And I'm doing equal parts of part A and part B. I believe I did 30 milliliters of each, and I did have some left over, but I always like to mix more than I need just in case. So once you have part A and part B measured, you are going to combine them into either one of the cups, or you can get a fresh cup as well. And I just use a popsicle stick. Some people like to use epoxy mixers or metal spoons, stuff like that. I'm just using a popsicle stick, and I got really great results, and I am mixing it thoroughly. And then I actually let it sit in front of my space heater for like 10 minutes to pop any bubbles. All right. Make sure when you're doing this, you're not going in with a very thick coat of epoxy, especially around the honeycombs, okay? You don't want epoxy to collect around those and form air bubbles. So I am putting a very thin coat, and I'm rubbing my finger around the honeycombs so that I can make sure not a ton of epoxy is collecting in there. And if it does, I just kind of wipe it away with my finger. You guys should be honored I'm showing you the epoxy part, because I never do. Make sure you get that rim really good where we expose that stainless steel with a Dremel. We want to make sure we have epoxy up there so that it forms that perfect seal. Take your time with this. I'm not using fast set epoxy for this, so I do have a little bit more working time. I'm getting the bottom really good. I'm wiping away extra epoxy in those honeycombs. You can also use a paintbrush around the honeycombs. I know a lot of creators do that. And then I'm going to pop the bubbles with a torch. And I'm not getting super close to the cup with the torch, okay? You know, I am keeping probably like 12-inch distance so that I don't burn anything. And after that cures overnight, 12 to 48 hours usually, because it's cold here and I don't like to pick it up while it's sticky. But that's going to vary on your time in epoxy. After that, you can clean out the inside, and this is the final result. So I hope you guys love it. Thank you.